I'm Kenneth, and this is the Unspeakable Vice podcast where we talk about talking about sex. Sex is a dirty word, a taboo. It's something that just isn't talked about, and we're about to dig into why. So one of the first things that I said when I first started the podcast was that sex is never talked about openly. It does come up a lot in conversations, but it's usually a joke. And so to talk a little bit more about that today, I'm sitting here with my friend Jake.
Hello everybody, how you doing? My name's Jake.
And one of the reasons that I wanted to talk to him is that he can be a jokester, especially when it comes to sex, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it'll give us some perspective on how this goes. So I know we were talking earlier, Jake, about ways that you have either used humor or whatever to either break the ice, you said, or to sort of learn something about people. So you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's not like I come out right off rip and just start cracking perverted jokes. You know, I'm not that type of guy, but when I get to know somebody, sometimes I'll throw a bone out there, as I call it, say something, that they wouldn't expect to hear from just a normal person. And it is always some kind of sexual innuendo or joke. That's how I hope they perceive it, because some people don't take it in that manner, and most people do take it in a positive manner, and they do joke and laugh about it, or it turns into something, deeper than what a joke would be presumed as originally. So, with that being said, I have plenty of people that are, subject to me throwing a bone to them, and a lot of people get good reactions out of them, and it's all depending on how they react to me, so I can gauge what type of person they are based upon how they take the bone,
So what do you learn about a person by their reaction? Like, I know some people, and it depends on the circumstance you're in too, right? On the situation,
of course,
whether or not it's appropriate to talk about this. But what do you learn about somebody by how they react to a joke like this?
Well, you can learn a lot about a person as you say a sexual joke to them. You can gauge their sense of humor, especially, they bounce another joke back, or you might say something that they might actually pique their interest, and it might turn into a deeper conversation. And on the negative side of the spectrum, you have some people that may not take it positive at all, and they'll just shun away from it, or shun you, or they'll just, give you a glare, and it may have something deeper to do with something that's happened to them previously in their life. But at that point, you probably don't want to do any digging, because you're already on their bad side by bringing up a bad topic in their eyes. And then it shouldn't be a bad topic, because I see it as always a positive thing in my life. So I never had a problem with it previously, and I like joking around with it.
Sure.
I've always been joking around.
So I always say, right at the opening of the show, I say sex is taboo.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that people don't, like, you don't usually hear it brought up in polite company. So I imagine some of the reactions have to do with that, where people are just either not expecting it, they think it's inappropriate. I know I've done that, even with you sometimes. I thought, oh, Jake, you're being inappropriate. But so what do you think about that sort of reaction? Do you think it's reasonable that there are times and places that it's not appropriate to talk about that? Or do you think people are
of course, there's
overrating
a time.
It, maybe?
Yeah, of course, there's a time for everything. You're just not going to go into, an establishment, like a professional establishment, or, busting people's balls, so to speak, on some sexual jokes. There is always, for me, I have a good sense of people, because I've been around people my whole life. I've watched people, grew up with a big family, on all types of, I can pretty much gauge how people are going to react to what I say within the first, 10 or 20 minutes. And normally I don't ever joke around with somebody in a sexual manner until I've known them for about a couple days or a week or so, because I don't want them to come right out and be like, well, I just met you and you're a really freaky person, you know what I'm saying? You don't want to come off as a weirdo. But yeah, there's a time and place for everything. You just don't want to go into a courthouse and start spewing out sexual innuendos,
Right.
Or some establishment of that type. And any religious service, you wouldn't want to go in there and say some freaky stuff, because that's just inappropriate, even if you do know the person.
Right. So yeah, and then of course there's the opposite side of that, where if you're sort of in a more private area and you're around friends, then it's a lot easier to bring up. Now, one thing that I thought was really interesting is how you said sometimes a joke can turn into a deeper conversation. I'd love to hear more about that, especially if there are any specifics that you want to talk about.
Well, I don't want to get into anything too revealing of anybody's identities that I previously joked around with,
right.
But yeah, there was several times actually in my life, and even recently, that I was joking around with somebody sexually, and well, obviously verbally, sexually, not physically, but anyway, I said something to them, and they took took the bone, instead of bouncing a joke back or just laughing, they're like, "Oh, did you ever try or do this or that?" And I'm like, it took me off my seat, so to speak, for a second, because I was like, "Whoa, like this is turning into something else." And sometimes
That's interesting. I bet like the joke itself would be like you sort of taking control of the conversation and trying to catch them off guard, but it sounds like they switched it around.
Yeah, they definitely
took the control. That's cool. Oh yeah, so how did that go?
It was definitely like a catch-22, because then I was in the hot seat at that point, and
Right.
they threw the ball back in my yard, so to speak, and I was sitting there like, okay, so then I had to choose if I was going to either A, continue the conversation, or B, just say, hey, just laugh about it and move on. A lot of times we can continue the conversation, because it does bring up a deep, meaningful conversation that helps you do some soul searching, because there's not a lot of people that want to talk about stuff like that, and there's not a lot of people that are open about it. So most of the time I do continue it, and I try to gather insight on their perspectives and how they view whatever the joke may be at hand. Like sometimes it may say like in specific, like I put a status on a social media site the other day, and I put on there something about eating ass, and you wouldn't believe the amount of reactions I got. It was just ridiculous. And I said, the particular people that eat at this restaurant, if you eat this particular food, you guaranteed to eat ass. And everybody was like, that's spot on. Mm-hmm. And they all laughed at it. And then I actually had a couple people that went on there and questioned me and said, oh, you don't? There were several people that went in the comment section and was like, oh, you don't do this, you don't do that. And I'm like, it made me think, am I not normal for not indulging in this? I mean, lewd behavior. I wouldn't call it shunned behavior, because some people would probably love.
Right. Well, do you think they were joking back, or do you, or?
Oh, I think some of these people I know personally, and I'm certain that they're
like, I could imagine that's something that a lot of people joke about, but I could also imagine somebody sort of taking it serious or taking offense to the fact that it's joking.
Yes.
That is joking. Like, I eat ass and I'm proud of it, and this and that.
Yes, there were some people that were on there, and they kind of almost looked at me like I was wrong for never indulging in this activity. So I was like, what? And it actually made me sit there and look at my computer screen for a second like, huh, really? It almost made me feel more open to, at least trying some particular behavior that I may have not been comfortable with previously, because apparently it's the bee's knees, is what my friends quoted. That's what he really said.
That's what he said.
Yeah, so
I'm not particularly familiar with bees, but I have heard try everything twice. So there is some merit to going outside of your comfort zone and trying something new. But that's a different topic entirely. We don't need to get into that
exactly
right now. But you talking when the conversation turns serious. Do you have you had an experience where there was something valuable? I always think it's valuable to talk about this topic. I mean, that's why I'm doing the podcast and whatever. And so have you had a situation where the talk turned serious and you saw like something that was really valuable and like, wow, I'm glad we had that conversation. Not just to get to know somebody better but because you actually thought there was important information that was exchanged that otherwise would not be.
Yeah, that's actually pretty deep, honestly. Like, yeah, sometimes I do push further when they don't take the joke and they actually want to talk about the joke in a serious manner. I will, instigate a conversation about it to learn more about people in general and what their preferences would be, what their, kinks would be, or what anything may be with them, because I would like to know what the general consensus would be for what the normal would be regarding sex, because there is no normal with it. Everybody thinks not everybody thinks it's wrong, but there is a lot of people that think doing certain things sexually are wrong, and what's wrong and right is a fine line sexually, and I think it's all opinionated and by a personal preference of different people, because some people will be, oh, I would never do that, or I would do this, and oh, that's not normal, but this is, and you ask the next guy and he'll say it's normal. So it's all opinions, and I would just like to get like almost a percentage wise and see how many percent would do this, that, and the other. So I mean, and there are some deeper things, like you see some deeper foundings, and you get to know the people for who they are, or why they are the way they are because of something that may have happened previously in their life, or anything.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There's I think tons of stuff that we can learn about sex from each other that usually we're not. Those things just don't come up. We just don't get into those details. But if we do, we can find out, oh, this is normal, or oh, that's the right technique in that situation for how
Exactly,
how
yes.
to make that work or whatever.
Or make somebody happy, or do whatever. Or this will be better if you tried that, or you'll never keep a girl if you don't do this, or
Yeah, and like you said, a lot of that is opinion, but it's always good, I think, to hear other people's opinions and maybe that
yeah,
helps
exactly.
you form your own. I think probably a lot of those things people just either assumed because they heard it from somewhere else, or they came to their own opinion without really thinking it through that well. Just sort of like, oh well, this is what I'm going to do, and then exposed to somebody else's opinion that might change their mind. Let me ask the other question though. I asked how does that lead to a serious conversation, but what about when the jokes don't go over so well? Do you think that the jokes are inherently demeaning of the thing that you're joking about? By the fact that you're joking about it, it sort of makes it seem not serious, or makes it seem like you don't care about the legitimate part of that activity or whatever it is you're joking about.
So when somebody gives me a negative reaction to a joke that
or especially if they take offense to it.
Oh, okay.
So people, I have a group of friends that do streaming and stuff that sometimes joke, they're all guys, but sometimes they joke like the one guy is like being female, being feminine or something, and so they say, oh, you're a girl, or you're acting like a woman, and so obviously that can be offensive to women, that you're putting men above women, right? So I mean, that's just one example, but so do you think in general joking about a topic is going to demean it, or do you think not necessarily?
I think joking or bringing in any topic to light would shed more light upon it and make it less demeaning. But me being in a male position, as my sex is male, I have more tendencies to joke with men in a sexual manner, and I wouldn't like to joke with a woman in that manner unless I'm very comfortable with her, because then it would put her in an awkward juxtaposition to react negatively to my input. So if I give her a joking input of a sexual nature and I just met her, she may have a bad reaction to that, 'cause she's just thinking in her head, what is this weirdo on, or what is this guy on, or this guy is this, or that and the other, and I just don't want to have a shrewd opinion from a female because I decided to jump out the gate with a freaky innuendo. And normally I let them take the reins with that type of stuff, unless like I said, I get to know the person, and sometimes it does go over negatively with both sexes, even if you thought you know the person. And I've normally I just stray away from the question and say, hey, how's the weather today then, something else, because you don't want to be in a situation, and I tend not to dig too much into people's lives to see what's really making them tick and why they are having a bad reaction to that. But I think it all has to do with underlying perspectives in a schema that has formed in their mind because something that had previously happened to them in their life. So
joking around in general is usually a way to sort of broach an uncomfortable topic in a way that gives you an out, that lets you say, okay, I was just joking, I didn't mean it seriously, but it still lets you sort of talk about it. And so that's useful, particularly in sex, because it is so hard to talk about. Have you ever made a joke that was partly serious?
Of course, all the time, just to see how somebody gauges it and reacts. Like I said previously, you throw the ball out there to see how they want to react, and depending on how they react, you can gauge a lot about a person, So like when somebody laughs at the joke, or depending on a lot of body language even, they may have a disposition of the joke that you weren't aware of previous to that, or they may, let you know, oh, that's pretty funny, but I was actually curious about that, if it's a female. Or even one of your man friends may say, yeah, that's pretty funny, but it's curious. You say innuendo or anything like that. It's an icebreaker. It's like a really big icebreaker, as any jokes are. That's a good key word for
I like that word, it's an icebreaker. I always am an idealist. I'm always thinking about like what's the best case scenario. And so do you think it would be possible for people to be comfortable enough that you wouldn't need the joke to break the ice, that you could just say what you mean straight out? Or is there something special about sex that makes that impossible, or is that just...
With it being such an intimate nature, the sexual topic, it's just really hard to come out the gate and just bring it up on a straight up broad topic spectrum. Especially you're sitting at say you're sitting at a bar amongst friends, I'd say the smaller the circle, it'd be easier to do in a non-joking manner. But the bigger the circle, the more the people are going to say, there's a time and place for that, and this is wrong. You know, like the fact of the matter is, if you're on an adult setting, what's wrong about it? If you're in a bar, everybody's 21 plus, correct? So what's wrong with us talking about this?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it. The only thing wrong is the people's perspectives that are viewing it in a wrong manner.
Either shame or just nervousness about it because
Yes.
it's not socially acceptable, which is kind of like shame. I always like comparing sex to food. I think that's a really useful comparison. And so if you think about how people talk about food, it's everywhere. I mean, it's comfortable. People can talk about it. They might list it on their bio just as a fun aside or whatever. But I'm imagining sitting in the bar, some guys, what would a serious conversation about food look like? Maybe a guy would say to his friend, you know, I was making spaghetti sauce last night, and I was just curious, what's your like number one go-to spice? Because I know I like oregano, but it doesn't always come out the way I want it. What do you recommend, or what do you use? You know,
Yeah.
But and then if you translate that to a sexual question, like do you think that would be possible to have a question like that that's sexual in nature, or is that just asking too much?
I think in the general consensus of the general population, if you were to go out and, you know, people find it a very intimate topic, like I said before, and going out and just asking people about what they're into and not knowing, so a lot of people would take it the wrong way, but you would have some mostly closed opinions on it, 'cause nobody wants to come out the gate, or I'd say a lot of people don't want to come out the gate and tell you what they're into or what their taste, since you brought up food, what their tastes in a sexual nature would be.
Right.
Because some people may view their opinion as wrong, because, you know, like I said before, there's nothing normal when it comes to sex, or there's nothing normal because everybody has a different opinion of it. So it's going to be very hard to find somebody that's going to have an open mind enough to tell you what their taste is. And there are people out there that would say, yeah, this is my taste. This is what I'm into. This is what I like. Even if you didn't know them. And I see them all the time in reaction videos that are on the internet.
Yeah, I was going to say, so if somebody doesn't have a friend group that they're so comfortable with that they can just sit in the bar and ask a question, you know, whatever the question may be. I was, you know, trying this new type of lube the other day and it just wasn't quite working. Have you ever tried it? You know, so that would be a really weird question, but I could definitely see people going online and, you know, doing a YouTube search for such and such, or you know, finding that podcast that talks about that particular kink or that particular thing, and so they could get a perspective from a quote unquote expert. I don't want to. I mean, not everybody on YouTube is an expert, obviously, but they, you know, so they've got sort of this bottled opinion coming from the internet, instead of maybe if they could get it from their friends. I'm not saying their friends necessarily have more accurate information, but it would probably be more honest information. I would love to be in a world where those sorts of conversations are more common.
Well, since you brought up YouTube, I have watched a reaction video where people do a social experiment on YouTube, and they go around the mall or wherever they may be. A populated area has a bunch of, you know, obviously young ladies, and these are all men that are doing interviews, and they're asking in the interview, they come up and do exactly what we're just speaking about. Hey, are you into this? And I'm sure they ask for consent to upload after the fact, but to have that audacity and courage and confidence that the general population doesn't hold to go up to somebody and just ask that, especially not knowing if this female, or even in some situations a male, has a boyfriend or girlfriend. So it's really risky behavior in any sense you ask anybody, because it comes with risks. The boyfriend could react bad, the girl could react bad, or you could just be looked at like a plain weirdo because somebody else's opinion is stopping you from asking. And then albeit all these girls are, you know, 18 and over, so they're asking the questions and they're consenting to this short interview and video saying, yeah, I'd like you to upload this to the channel. And it's reaction of somebody's coming up right away, doesn't know the girl, is saying, or supposedly doesn't know the girl, and saying, you know, for example, what are you into, and the girl would say this, that, and the other. And some of the times you do see awkward reactions where the friends are like, no, I'm not down to talk about that. And I don't know if it's about self-confidence or if it's about just the schema of the general population's consensus on sex. You're not supposed to talk about it, or it's wrong, or this is, you know. And I feel like the younger generation's coming out more, where it's more open and people are more cool and down to talk about it, with it being a casual thing.
That might be true. I hope that's true. And I have seen a lot of that, like you said, online, but I have not seen a lot of that in person.
In person, yeah.
And I'm sure, everybody's friend group is different, and I hope a lot of people have friend groups where these sorts of topics are more open, but
relevant. Yeah,
we'll have to see how that goes. There's still a lot of shortcomings across the board in society as that goes.
yeah.
We started talking about jokes, but we're talking about slightly more serious topics now.
Yeah, maybe
so,
something for another episode at some point.
Maybe. One thing that I want to sneak in here though is this idea of protection for sex is something that I know I don't like to joke about, but it's also something that people have a really hard time bringing up. Like, even if you're close enough with a person to think about being in a sexual, being sexually intimate with them, it's still sometimes hard to bring up, whether it's birth control or using a condom or whatever else like that.
Yeah.
What sort of impression do you get as far as that? Do you think that's something that that's a topic that people just try to avoid, or do they, how have you seen people talk about that topic?
Me being a 26-year-old male growing up in the era from 1994 to current, I know that a lot of my peers do not use sexual protection. Now they may use an anti-pregnancy deal where the female has to take a contraceptive, but as far as protection from STDs goes, it's pretty fair game for them out there. I mean, it's honestly, I know of a couple people that regularly wear, rubbers, as we call them. And but I'd say percentage-wise for my friends, and I do ask a lot of my friends about this, do you wear protection? Do you use a contraceptive? I'd say a lot of the men and the women prefer the sex without the condom, clearly, but it's probably a percentage of, like, in my generation, I'd say 75% of people are not wearing condoms.
And to some extent, that's a personal choice and a preference and all that. But do you think they have a hard time talking about it? Like, do they not use a condom because they're scared that people will think they're weird if they bring it up, or do you think they're just not worried about it?
I think it's a carefree society for the younger generation out here, because they're just, I can't say they're because I'm still young. We're just trying to live our lives and enjoy it to the best, and we're kind of living while we're young in the moment. And with that being said, it's just a lot of people that aren't, to say the least, they're not giving a shit, and they just want to feel good while they can. And obviously, sex feels better raw or unprotected. And I feel like
I would
people
push back against that, but that's for another episode too. Like, some people will actually fetishize condoms and stuff like that, but
I've never heard of it previously, but that's probably an opinion.
Choice,
so
so
it's a personal choice. So I'd say a lot of people don't wear them, but
Yeah.
like I said, it's all up to the opinion of the person that's, I guess, copulating, you could say, for a professional word of sex. But whoever's fucking, if you want to say it with that term, it's all up to them, really. And I ask a lot of my friends, when you're having sex, do you wear a condom? And I think it's like 75 to 80% of my younger gentlemen out here are not wearing condoms.
What's their reaction when you ask the question? Like, do they laugh at you for even bringing it up?
Yes.
It's
like a smirk. It's like a quick smirk, and they're like, "What?
Of course not."
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. They're kicking off guard, and depends on how long I know them. And some of them
I'm just thinking in general, in my own reasoning here of why that might be, but I'm also wondering if there's like a tough guy sort of vibe going on with that, like, oh, well, real men don't
exactly
worry about that, or they don't care, or something. I don't know, but
I think it's more of so how an animal would mark his turf, and us men, we get around and I've been with that girl, I've been with this girl, and I guess if you've been with her and you had a condom on, some men would say that don't even count.
That doesn't count.
Yeah, that doesn't count. You weren't in there with no No protection, so you don't know what that's really like.
I'm not sure what points people are hoping to score there, but I totally get the idea.
It's some kind of complex that these younger gentlemen are holding, but
definitely a competition.
it's a competition for sure.
Yes. There's a reason they call it a pissing contest, right?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. Anyway, well, this was a great conversation. Thank you, Jake, for doing this. I don't know. We might end up doing this again sometime because this was pretty cool.
Of course,
We'll see
yeah.
how
I
it
had a
goes.
hard time doing this. It was pretty cool. I'm glad to help you break the ice, so to speak, with the joke and sexual innuendos.
Definitely. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Take care.
Sexually transmitted infections are no joke. According to the Centers for Disease Control, infection rates have gone up just about every year over the past 5 or 10 years. And almost half of those new infections are among youth aged 15 to 24. The most common infections are chlamydia, gonorrhea, and syphilis, but other diseases are still concerning as well. So if you're sexually active or if you're thinking about being sexually active, this is a conversation you need to have. Please make sure you talk with your partner, with your doctor, understand the risks, and do what you can to keep yourself safe.